How's it going, guys? So I got another black and white UU upload this evening, and I was originally going to send this into Project Mosh Pit, but I decided just to upload it to my own channel because I'm kind of behind on uploads again. But yeah, this is one of the closest Wi-Fi battles I've had in some time, so should make for a pretty good watch. Anyway, I'm going with Arcanine. He's leading off with a Mew, and I'm assuming that this is probably going to be his Stealth Rocker, just based on the fact that he led with it. And also looking at the rest of his team, I'm actually going to go for a Toxic first turn. He switches to a Hitmontop to get the Intimidate off, and this is probably even better for me because my team is pretty dependent on entry hazards, and Hitmontop is his spinner, of course. I'm actually going to go into Slowbro now to a wall with Hitmontop. Probably could have been a lot more careful about switching it in directly though, because Toxic's a pretty standard move on Hitmontop, and he ends up going for that on the switch. I mean, it's not really a game breaker because I still have Slack Off and Regenerator, but it does mean that I can't stay in for too many consecutive turns with Slowbro. Anyway, he's going to go into his Shaman while I predict the switch and double switch to Roserade. Pretty much just wanted to get up a free layer of spikes because both of us have already been doing a pretty good amount of switching already, so I just wanted to start laying down some entry hazards and making it more difficult for him to switch around. He's actually going to go into his Darmanitan, and I'm just going to go into Slowbro to take his attack. He went for a U-turn, which was the smart move, just to maintain his offensive momentum. Even though it's super effective though, Slowbro is still basically the best Darmanitan counter around, because U-turn does right around 33%, which means Regenerator is just enough to heal it off perfectly, and of course Flare Blitz really isn't a problem either. So now he's going to switch into his Mew, and I'm assuming that he was probably going to go for that Stealth Rock, just trying to tie things up on the entry hazard side of things, but he actually reveals himself to be a Nasty Plot set, and that's going to be kind of difficult for me because I'm going to have to sacrifice at least one thing to get his Mew down to low enough health for me to check it. So just based on the fact that it was Nasty Plot, I made the decision to abuse Donphan's Sturdy ability just to get up Stealth Rock, because I don't really think that there's going to be another time I can do it right now. And this is going to be kind of difficult to deal with because Mew is like a super versatile Pokemon, the most versatile in the game. So it doesn't really have a standard set. It can run a ton of different sets really viably. So I don't really know what his exact moveset is. Of course, I do have Scarf Rotom to function as an emergency check, but Mew's still pretty bulky without any investment. So even Shadow Ball is not going to be enough to take out his Mew at this point. I mean, it's still at pretty good health. So I just went into Snorlax only on the fact that it was my special wall, so it should be able to take one of his attacks and attack with Body Slam. I was kind of hoping for the 30% paralysis, but I don't get it. And at this point, I realized that I still need Snorlax to take on his Zapdos and other special attackers, so I decided I'm probably just going to need to sacrifice Arcanine because it's not really going to be too important on my team. Actually going to be the least important member right now, so I'm just going to sacrifice it to get in something on a free turn. And since he is running a Nasty Plot set, that is going to be able to outspeed me, so I really have no other choice but to go for an extreme speed. Kind of hoping that it was going to KO him, but I just miss out on the KO because he survives with a sliver of red. So that does mean that I'm going to be able to be taken out by his Mew, but he is running a Life Orb, so it does mean that he's going to take himself out as well, which really isn't too bad. And next he's going to go into his Cobalion while we go to my Rotom. The reason why I'm running just standard Rotom instead of like one of the Rotom forms is because I still need a spin blocker, but without an electric type, I would be really vulnerable to stuff like Togekiss and even Sigilyph, so this really helps for that. And I'm just going to Volt Switch out into Slowbro while he goes for the taunt, and you can see that that Volt Switch did a pretty good amount of damage because Cobalion is pretty frail on the special side, although it's got like really good physical bulk. And I'm just going to go for the Scald. Slowbro is a pretty good Cobalion counter as well, unless he's running like a Calm Mindset, which is really rare actually. But he's actually going to just go into his Shaman to take the Scald. I don't get the burn, but it doesn't really matter because he would have Natural Cure anyway. And on this turn, I went to Roserade to pretty much take on his Shaman. He actually goes for a pretty smart prediction by going for that super effective Hidden Power on the switch. I'm assuming that it was probably Fire, although I guess it could be Ice as well. So yeah, I'm actually going to go for that Sludge Bomb. Luckily, I had just enough special bulk to avoid that 2-hit KO, which makes Roserade a pretty reliable counter for the most part. But yeah, as I mentioned, I go for that Sludge Bomb, and that does manage to do a pretty good amount of damage to his Hitmontop. I'm not really sure why he decided to switch in Hitmontop directly, unless he was just like desperate to get off a Rapid Spin and clear away my hazards. But at this point, I'm thinking, okay, it's either going to be Rapid Spin or Sucker Punch. So I went to Rotom, which would have been able to take both. But instead, maybe he predicts the switch or just goes for a random Toxic. I'm not really sure what his thought process was behind that. But yeah, he definitely makes some really unpredictable moves in this game, which definitely catches me off guard. and I wasn't really sure if he even had Sucker Punch at this point because some Hitmontop will run Stone Edge instead, so I just stayed in with Rotom to finish it off with Volt Switch. But yeah, it turns out that he does have Sucker Punch, and that does manage to do a pretty good chunk to Rotom, which is kind of unfortunate for me. And I just picked Snorlax as the Volt Switch recipient in this case, because I just wanted to get off a little bit more leftovers recovery so I can better deal with his special attackers later. So he's going to go into his Shaman, and even though Snorlax is really specially bulky, I still want to save it for taking on his Zapdos better later. So I'm actually going to go into Rotom, which I really don't need at this point, so I'm just going to sacrifice it to his Seed Flare. Wasn't really sure about switching in Roserade directly either, because he could have gotten that special defense drop and then finished me off with a hidden power maybe. So he's actually going to go for the rest in this case just to heal off the damage. I mean, he's at the red, so it does mean that he'll have to recover off that damage pretty soon. So I'm pretty much going to just predict that and go for the Sludge Bomb to do a pretty good amount of damage to his Shaman. And that's going to bring him back down into the red, and I'm assuming that he's probably going to want to switch out in this case. So instead of going for another Sludge Bomb, I'm actually going to get up a second layer of spikes on the switch. Reason I went for this is because it's going to be low enough that when he switches back into the entry hazards, his Shaman's going to be dead. So yeah, that pretty much took out Shaman just indirectly by going for spikes there. He's going to switch into his Cobalion, and now that it is confirmed to be a physical attacker, looks like Slowbro is going to be a perfect switch into his Cobalion. I mean, it doesn't really have that high of an attack stat even after the Swords Dance, so I should be able to take it pretty well. But yeah, unfortunately for him, he does get the Stone Miss, and that does mean that I'll be able to finish him off with Scald. I mean, if you run the damage calcs, you'll see that +2 Stone Edge still doesn't do that much to Slowbro, but it's still kind of unfortunate for him considering he could have gotten a possible crit or something anyway. So he's going to go into his Zapdos now, and this is actually going to be pretty problematic for me, as you'll see from the set. I just went to Roserade on the first turn Thunderbolt and maybe pivot back to something else for Heat Wave or Hidden Power Ice to scout that, but he actually predicts a switch and goes for Metal Sound. It's a pretty cool concept because basically you predict the switch and get the special defense drop and then just hit whatever the switch in is a lot harder. And here I make what is probably the worst move of the game by switching to Slowbro to take the possible Heat Wave or Hidden Power Ice. And I really didn't want to switch Snorlax in at this point because it's at pretty low health, which means I'll be forced to rest off the damage and then be vulnerable for a couple of turns while he gets all those Metal Sound drops on me. But yeah, it probably would have been a better idea looking back on this. Anyway, I'm going to go into Roserade now on the Thunderbolt. Pretty much just wanted to get off some Regenerator healing with Slowbro. And I'm still not sure at this point if he even is carrying Heat Wave or Hidden Power Ice, because he's doing a really good job of hiding his moveset, whatever it is. So yeah, he even decides to switch out at this point and go to his Shaman. And I guess this was pretty much just to sacrifice it and get a free turn with one of his other Pokemon. So yeah, I just go for the Sludge Bomb to try to get some damage on his Zapdos. But of course it doesn't matter because Shaman dies to entry hazards on that turn. So yeah, he ended up using that to his advantage, which was pretty smart. He's going to go into his Darmanitan now, and obviously I only have one safe switch into this, but he's actually going to go for a Flare Blitz now. And after the prior damage from Zapdos' Thunderbolt with Toxic factored in, I actually might not be able to prevent that 2-hit KO, which means I'm going to be forced to sacrifice one of my other 2 remaining team members. And I actually made the decision to go into Snorlax, just based on that reasoning from earlier. I didn't want to go for the rest turns while he gets Metal Sound drops on me. Looking back on this though, again, I think that it might have been better to save Snorlax, because if I got a Body Slam Paralysis on him, it would have been a lot easier to deal with his Zapdos. Not really sure though, at the time I still wasn't exactly sure what his entire Zapdos moveset was, so I just wanted to kind of keep Roserade because it might have been able to handle it one-on-one. Again, it's kind of guesswork at this point. So yeah, I am going to go back into Slowbro after that 33% healing, and that is going to manage to take out his Darmanitan, so at least I got that out of the way. And we're both down to our last few Pokemon. He's only got his Zapdos, I've only got my Slowbro and Roserade, and depending on which moveset his Zapdos is running, that's going to determine whether or not he's going to be able to beat me. So he's actually going to predict the switch and go for Metal Sound, but at this point there's really no need for me to keep my Slowbro anyway, so I'm just going to stay in and go for Scald, hoping to get a burn or maybe just some extra damage on him. And he seems to be running a lot of bulk, maybe like special defense EVs as well, because Scald definitely doesn't do very much at all. And he just finishes me off with Thunderbolt at this point, and that does take out Slowbro, which leaves my last Pokemon Roserade. So at this point there's really not much else I can do outside of spamming Sludge Bomb. And whether or not he's running Heat Wave or Hidden Power Ice is going to determine whether or not he's going to be able to beat me with his Zapdos. I mean, if he actually does have one of those, he actually did a really good job of concealing his moveset. I mean, he didn't use it this whole time, and he even switched out earlier, so that kind of gives me the impression that he doesn't have it. But he just goes for that metal sound and finally reveals Hidden Power Ice, and that does mean that I'm going to be able to be taken out by his Zapdos next turn. Just went for the Sludge Bomb. The only way that I could have won at this point is if I got a crit or something, but that doesn't happen, and he is going to be able to finish me off with Hidden Power Ice. So yeah, that's actually going to wrap up this match with a pretty narrow 1-0 defeat for me. So yeah, as always, thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll be seeing you guys on Thursday.